your face. I was told, basing on the talk, we can really appreciate our government for being so kind and magnanimous to us also, but we also have to tighten our belts, and we also have to see that I attended the executive meeting last night. So as I call out your name, you have joined us today, so we are very grateful. This is the unit, the interaction. So for the interaction, I would like to ask the ushers to please pass around the mic.
Every year, about 10-12 students appear in the exam. Almost every year, every single student gets first division. Some gets distinction, and every student gets letter mark in at least one subject. So if Padma Shri, Padma Vibhushan are to be continued with by the government, that these are the people who should be honored, who should be awarded with these awards. But instead, there is active discouragement from the government. The government looks at us with eyes of suspicion, as if we are doing something wrong. It is the edupreneurs who have brought some bit of quality to the field of education and made education accessible. Now, what does government do? Government in Ulubari Sariali, if you go by the GS road, you will see a big school established long back, Ulubari Higher Secondary School. Yet the parents have chosen to pay fees, whatever meager amount of fees. These are rickshawalas, thelawalas, ferrywalas, vegetable vendors who on a ganiset at Ulubari Sariali on footpath, they sell their goods. After passing class 10, they do not have money to take admission in a government college. So teachers who already get less salary, they take money out of their pocket and pay the fees of the admission. So, what does government do? Not only provides free education, free lunch, free books, free bags, free uniform. Free everything. Yet, parents have chosen to come to us. As somebody said, we do not point a gun at the head of some other parents. That, hey you, put your child in my school or I'm going to shoot you. We don't say that. People come. Despite all the negative publicity that private schools are bad, yet people come to us. So we must be doing something good, right? Otherwise, why people would come? So the thing is that we must become an advocacy group. We must write in the newspapers. We must engage with the editorial class and the journalists and the opinion makers. Now the new genre of journalists are coming up through YouTube podcasts and everything. So there we must engage and tell about them the good work that we are doing. So why there is, despite our good work, why there is this resistance, this active obstacles in our path? I would say there are 2-3 reasons. One is that the idea, even NEP has written, if you read the NEP, it's clearly written there that we should, and remember, the NEP members are the top thinkers, rocket scientists, ISRO specialists, ISRO scientists. Whether it is Supreme Court judges or the MPs, the ministers, the bureaucrats, whoever, all people, they say profit is bad and private schools make profit. They have written, NEP has written that most schools make profit and these are to be discouraged. But there are some schools which are charitable minded, they should be encouraged. My contention is profit is not a dirty word. Sure, there will be schools which will not want profit. Ramakrishna Mission is there, Vivekananda Kendra is there, lots of Catholic missions are there, Protestant schools are there, that is Hindu missionaries, Christian missionaries. And there are other organizations that do not want to make profit. Fine, let them become not-for-profit organization invoke tax claim status. But there are schools that make profit. Outlook had published a cover magazine. They show how the private schools make profit. But the problem is, profit is a dirty word in India, and most people who believe in communism. Second problem is, people do not know what is price. So price and profit, these are two closely connected, which is not understood by most Indians. The third thing that we do not understand is what is money. I am not going into that today because this is not the forum. We do not have time. But we actually have done a talk in our school saying, are schools necessary? Do schools matter? It is there in our school website, YouTube also, you can watch if you want. I contend that if schools are so bad, let's shut down all the schools. During COVID, if we found that online classes are so great, why should we have schools? As it is, private school owners are bloodsuckers, we are vultures. So let us shut down all private schools. Let's see how society functions. So, if that is so, for example, government feels that it should regulate. Now, out of 28 plus 1 states in India, because why say plus 1? Kashmir is somewhere in between. So 28 states in India, some 17 states have already passed fee regulation authorities, acts. And these are passed under the Supreme Court case in the PA Inamdar case. So the TMA Pai Foundation case said that fees should be commensurate with the facilities provided. PA Inamdar said, parents will not come and ask you, okay, principal madam, let me show your books of accounts and I will see whether your fees is commensurate. Since guardians cannot see it, state governments must make a committee. And that is how the openings came about for the state governments to make legislations. And gradually all states will have it because it is in the nature of governments to accumulate more and more power. So it's a game of power. So they cannot run their own schools, they are metric fails, but they will come and tutor students who get first division in maths. This is the condition. These government officials cannot run their own schools, but they will teach us how to run schools. Like the B.Ed professors, they have never set foot in a school, but they will teach us how we can be good teachers.
And there were basically at 2 places, I will say, there were private schools and private schools' role and contribution was well recognized. One was the very high-end private schools, something like Doon School, right? Why? Because there were jamindars, rajas, princes, rich fellows who would say all this education system that government is designing, it's a mass education system. It's for common people. It's not for us. We are the special people, the powerful people, the landlords, right? And therefore all the privileged, they sent their kids to a better, high-cost, reputed, class-conscious private schools, which is high-end. Then the second kind of contribution of private school was wherever government is not present, right? There was Naxal-affected area, tribal areas, hilly areas. It's a new government with limited resources, can't go everywhere and open schools. And therefore, it actually encouraged private schools and private philanthropists or even people with money to set up their schools. And therefore, in India, you go to a rural area, you will find some Lala charitable trust running schools, etc., right? So at 2 places where they themselves are not available or therefore a class, private schools were existing and they were never in conflict with the government. Why? Because they were providing some kind of supportive role. Where the problem started, the problem, in my opinion, majority of these problems has started post-1991. Why it has started post-1991? Because, once again, till 90s, if you look at private school enrollment in entire country, it was below 10%. So 90% of student population in India was enrolled in government schools. 10% exceptionally were enrolled in private schools. There was no problem. What actually started happening post 1991 with introduction of economic reforms, India for the first time started growing and growing fast. Before that, the average growth rate was roughly 4%, which was popularly called as the Hindu rate of growth. I mean, people in economics would have learned all of those things. Post 91 reforms, when India started actually growing 6%, 7%, 8%, to the extent even 10%, now that actually led to people having increased purchasing power. Urbanization started happening. More nuclear families started coming. India got exposed to the world, right? You started valuing education more, you have purchasing power, parents have aspiration, and now, unlike earlier, when parents used to have 4 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids, now there are smaller families with 1, 2, 3 kids, with more aspiration and more purchasing power. What parents desired to give the best future to their kids. How is that possible? By giving a better quality education. And anyone could see that the quality of education is missing in government schools. That gave rise to more private schools, and what at times in people in education say, the revolution of private schools. Post 91, if you see, there is fast growth, more number of private schools opening, and enrollment is also catching up fast. To the extent today, India-wise, country-wise, roughly 45% students are enrolled in private school. This during 90s used to be below 10%, right? So anyway, from past, I'm coming to the current situation. So basically, the key point I wanted to make is post-91, as people have more purchasing power, high level of aspiration, they want to give good quality of education, quality is missing, which created a scope, a market for private schools, and entrepreneurs started responding to it. They set up schools, they can improve, in terms of quality, they can offer slightly better and get more number of kids. So that is what is happening. Now, here is the problem. Now, what has actually started, which was supposed to be earlier, the business of government. Now, in some sense, you have captured their business. And therefore, more and more conflict and more regulation is coming. And therefore, as Pankaj ji said, I spend a good amount of time with policy makers, and therefore I try to understand what they are thinking about it. And usually their approach is that these are our students, these are private school students. Our job is to make sure our schools look better, our kids looks better. They're not thinking about all kids. And therefore some of the solutions that we offer, it doesn't find landing ground because they have a different priority, right? And therefore these days, there is huge concern within Education Ministry and Department that there is increasing enrollment in private school, which means, if you look at UDICE data between 2010-11 and 17-18, you will find roughly 1.5 crore increase in private school enrollment, and during the same period, decline of 1.5 crore students in government school, which simply gives you signal that there is a movement, migration or preference of parents over private schools compared to government schools, right? Now, the more number of schools that the government create, now think about it. And therefore, I use this term that while they say private school is, it's a commercial venture, you are doing a business, you are making profit. Actually, running a government school is government's business. The more their business expands, the more money they make. Now, if you can ask why and how. The first thing, where the school will be opened, it's a political decision, right? And therefore, some politicians will capitalize upon making it open in his constituency, his village, his urban area, where he can attract his most voter. And therefore, it is beneficial. He can go to his voter and say, I am opening this school for your kids. And therefore, I am doing a great service to you. So, politically beneficial. Second, the moment school is sanctioned and the entire infrastructure building process happens, in the contract, you make money. You make your cuts. So, and it is known fact. Now, I think anyone can openly talk about it. There is a fixed amount of percentage. So let's say 1 crore rupees is being spent. By default, you are at least, you are the greatest, honest, best guy, but at least you'll get 10 to 20% in your kitty, right? So it is financially beneficial. And then you do the teacher's appointment, recruitment, and all of that. So it's a politically sellable. And therefore, and what you have done, you have actually encroached upon their business. You have taken away their business, right? And therefore, there is a competition. And therefore, this understanding of why not to like private schools as much, right? Now what I'll do is, this is how I wanted to set up the context a little bit. Now I will come to present. And I'll run through a few slides just to give you overview of how education system is designed. Within that, I will briefly talk about our experience with Right to Education Act and what can possibly be hope for with the new education policy, with some key provisions. And then, accordingly, based on this information, I can suggest, in my opinion, how the future of private school looks like. But similarly, you are also free to make your own opinion based on your experience and some of the data and facts I can give you. How I have titled the session is Education System in India. It's a conflict, contradiction, and confusion. And anyone who can, in my opinion, can make the best sense out of it is qualified to win a Nobel Prize, because it's such a confusing thing. Every state has their own way of dealing with it. And basically what I'm going to do, I know in 1 hour it's such a vast subject, I can't cover everything, but at least by end of my talk, my objective is, can I make you curious to find your own answer, as I am trying to find answer to some of these questions. You can also try to do so. And to begin with that, I have few questions to ask. And therefore, I think it is important that always we are asking why it is happening. I will just give you a few examples, and you can think of yourself, right? Here is a media press cutting, and this example is from Uttar Pradesh, but this is not to vilify a particular state, right? This is happening all across the country. I have just picked up this example. Here, what is this news about? There was opening for 62 positions in Uttar Pradesh for peon and postperson, Dakia, and the eligibility was only grade 5. You should be grade 5, you should know how to run a bicycle. That's the qualification. 62 positions. How many people have applied for this? More than 93,000. Including those who have done PhD, law, MBA, engineering, and they're applying for a job of peon. And we need to ask why it is happening. That too, when for 75 plus years, if we are thinking about we have done a great job in education, why is that happening? The next question is, this is once again from Uttar Pradesh, but this has been true in many other places. There is something called CAG, Controller and Auditor General of India, and similarly there is State CAG. The State CAG, when it was auditing the finance of state government in education, so they were basically looking at how well RTE is being implemented. In the process, they found, it's a state agency, which found that there are roughly 1.1 crore ghost students. In a country where we want more students, more schools, more teachers, there are fake enrollments. And we need to ask why. Why someone is just doing these fake registration for students, right? My next question is, this is an example from Chennai, and my previous example was there are schools where there are no students and there are fake registrations. Here are schools where actually parents are queuing up, they're lining up for all night. Why? Just for in morning, the school gate will open and they will get admission form. It is not all even for admission, just to get admission form. Now why is this happening? There are two exactly contradictory examples. My another example is, we have TET exams, very popular, teacher eligibility test, CTET, which is at a central level and a state level. As RTE had mandated it, now almost all teachers are supposed to qualify this exam, and majority of them, more than 95%, in some cases 97%, 98% of these teachers who are B.Ed graduate, who have a professional degree to become a teacher, actually are failing this test. Why is this happening? And if this is the status of our qualified teachers, which means they have qualification, they have a degree, but not the competency, then what is happening inside the classroom? And here is one news cutting. This is from Governance Now. The Right to Education Act, which was much celebrated for finally giving fundamental right to children, that no one can deny their right to education, actually started leading towards closure of schools. And this is an old news. When it was completing 5 years, this report was that there are roughly 1 lakh schools which are likely to shut down. Why? Because they cannot comply with the norms prescribed in the Act. Right? So a legislation which was drafted to give more education was actually shutting down schools. Now what are the key points here to learn if we are trying to understand the education system? The first and most important thing is that education is a state subject. This is debated because it is in concurrent list and Government of India has also done it. But for all practical reason, majority of tasks are done at a state level, and therefore basically it's a state subject. And because it's a state subject, the entire planning, monitoring, evaluation, financing, everything happens at a state level. There are some contribution coming from central government. So the key thing is then what the union government does. Union government actually conducts some research, will give some budget, will come up with some new kind of scheme, will set up a special kind of school, but all of that happens in alignment with the state government. And therefore I'm emphasizing the state government is the most powerful thing if you want to introduce any kind of change. Government of India, do not expect much from them. What if you have to do something, do with the state government of Nagaland. And even after doing all of these things, the state has limited capacity and limited resources, right? A limited budget, so they can't do everything. And that is what has given rise to private schools.